Order. I now call Senator Steele-John to make his first speech, and I ask honourable senators that the usual courtesies be extended to him. I call Senator Steele-John.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. Pay respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and recognise that sovereignty was never ceded. Mr. President, I'm happy to say that this is in fact my first speech. I'm also pleased to be able to deliver my first speech on such a historic day. I feel quite privileged to be able to do so on the day when the Senate has moved justice on its way to the other place. As the youngest person ever to be elected to the Senate and one of the few people with a disability to ever enter the federal parliament, I think it's safe to say that my presence here in this chamber is a rather radical departure from the norm. Before I entered the Senate a few short weeks ago, I, like so many of those beyond this chamber, was frustrated that the work of Parliament doesn't always seem to reflect those and the views and aspirations of those who send us here, particularly my generation. In approaching my first speech tonight, I want to talk about this disconnect. I want to talk about the things that reflect my views of how our democracy should function. Now here as their representative, I have the opportunity to find out what the people who sent me here want me to do for them. For I believe that Parliament must be the voice of the people. It must be relevant to them. And so I reached out via social media and asked a simple question. If you could say anything to the people in this place, what would you say? And I'm rather thrilled to be able to say that the response was quite overwhelming. Over 130,000 people saw our post. Almost 3,000 people told me what is important to them and what they think we should be doing here in this Parliament. And that's not including the countless phone calls to my office, the emails and the many letters I've received, as well as the conversations that I've had with constituents. Now, it should not come to a surprise, as a surprise to anyone in this chamber, that many of these messages were laced with sentiments of frustration, anger and sadness. In the words of many of them, there is a real need for we here in this place to recognise and respect the voices and views of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians, particularly in relation to the Uluru Statement. In the words of one of my WA constituents, please respect and value the Uluru Statement and implement what it asks. We, the First Nations people of this country, want to progress our relationship with governments and reconcile the past to help our future generations, my children and their children. There were also many people who spoke of the need to take urgent action to address the profound act of intergenerational theft, which is inaction on climate change. In the words of one, no more coal mines and get on board with renewables. I am so sick of having to choose between food and bills, especially my electricity bill. There was a great sense of outrage to the extent to which this Parliament is being held hostage by big money. People are sick of the fact that tax seems to be increasingly an optional extra for the very many multinational corporations which make profits in this country, and acknowledge that this Parliament must be returned to the people to do their work rather than the vested interests which manage to so successfully get into the ear of so many. In the words of one, let us, the people, and not listen to us, the people, and not your donors. In the words of another, spread the wealth. Don't let big business rule this country. And finally, and I echo this statement strongly, stop the revolving door between career politicians and lobbyists. Now, Mr. President, I was also greatly heartened to see that so many of the people that reached out to me hold within them a sense of moral clarity, which seems to be so lacking when this chamber and the other place considered issues in relation to refugees, particularly the ongoing humanitarian crisis that is Manus Island. We were buried, quite frankly, under a deluge of commentary around the need for Australia to take a more humanitarian approach to refugees and asylum seekers than we currently do. And I would urge everybody within this chamber tonight and listening at home to take heed of that demand. Think more of your fellow Australians than you seem to in your actions. We are a compassionate people. We are a caring people. We are a nation built by those who come across the sea seeking a better life. Let these sentiments guide you. Let this history guide you. Listen to these words. Another issue which was expressed continually was the need for us to recognise that housing is not a market. Housing is not an investment. Housing is in fact a human right. And our failure to recognise this central truth results in tens of thousands of our fellow Australians living each night on the streets. And of course, people living with a disability felt that they could reach out to me and share their aspirations. There were also comments of a more solemn tone. In the words of one, the thing I find lacking is genuine empathy and compassion for others and care for our planet. In the words of another was a request for us here to think of the next generation, not of ourselves. And in an email I received just this morning, someone said to me, thank you for sharing our dreams and taking them seriously. And I would ask everyone here today to reflect upon the way in which we here view the idealism of those who do not work in this place. How easy it is to dismiss the aspiration and the belief that we can be better, that we can do things differently, as simply naive. I know from personal experience that my generation is one alive with the desire to make change, cognizant of the fact that if we do not do so, the world in which we will live as a generation will be so much bleaker for it. And then there were, of course, we must remember that this is, after all, the internet, there were, of course, those comments of a slightly more humorous nature. My favourite so far has been the suggestion that the government might perhaps try turning itself off and back on again. That was the cleanest one we could find. This mixture of hope and frustration, of sadness and aspiration, does not come as a surprise to me personally. These sentiments very much reflect those which drove me to be involved in politics, and which are with me as I sit here tonight. They are also the sentiments which drove into existence the party which I am so proud to belong to. The desire for a world based on social justice, one which protects the environment in which we all live. The desire for a politics which truly involves people in decision-making processes, and the need for a government which seeks peace at every opportunity. These are the core tenets of the Greens Party and our movement, and I am incredibly proud to sit here among colleagues who have borne the voice of that movement into this place. It is very clear, I believe, to anybody who takes the time to look, that the Australian people are no longer satisfied with what they are getting from their politics. They will not cop politics as usual any longer. They know we can do better. They ask us to do better. They demand a new deal from their politics. And while I am here, that is exactly what I intend to work with my colleagues to achieve. With the time I am given here, I will be a tireless champion for a fundamental change in the way that society thinks about people with a disability. We must now recognise that disability is not created as the result of various medical impairments, but is in fact created by society's collective failure to adapt to and embrace and celebrate the varying levels of ability which we all have. I will also be a fearless voice for a jobs-rich transition to the new economy, one which I know and one which any expert would be very happy to tell anybody in this chamber is the only solution to actually creating the jobs which will employ people in communities like the one from which I come. I will be a voice in this chamber for that urgent action on climate change, which must happen if my generation is not to be condemned to a future in which we work tirelessly to try to clean up a mess created by those who came before us. And I will not cease in my belief that every Australian has a right to go to sleep in a bed of their own, that homelessness is not natural, that it is not right, that it is not the way things always must be, but is in fact a result of our failure to act. And while I am at it, Mr. President, I will build on the incredible work of former Senator Ludlam in the digital rights and communications areas, particularly in relation to the NBN. The National Broadband Network is the Snowy River scheme of the 21st century, and it is being comprehensively wrecked by the technological ineptitude which is displayed by those which have so far had carriage of it. It is the 21st century, and in the 21st century it is necessary not only to properly codify those human rights which we all presume to have, but which we so often find do not actually exist within a Bill of Rights, but also to extend that work to the digital realm, and to ensure that when we participate in that space as citizens, we are protected and that our rights are safeguarded. These are the things with which I relish the opportunity to now work with my Greens colleagues. These are the things with which I will wholeheartedly and genuinely work with any member of this chamber, regardless of their political stripes, if they are willing to meet me there. Because if we fail to do these things, if we fail to listen, if we fail to take heed, then people will continue to turn away from us. They will continue to turn our back on us. They will continue to regard the workings of this place as alien to them. And if anybody in this chamber is a student of history, as I am in my spare time, such sentiments do not lead to good places. Finally, I think I would be not quite hung, drawn and quartered, but some version of the same, if I neglected to thank those people who have helped me so profoundly in being here tonight. Firstly, to former Senator Josephine Valentine, the mother of our Greens WA movement, the tireless champion of the causes of peace and of disarmament. Thank you. If it was not for your work and your courage, then WA would not have the Greens voices that it does. To former MLC Giz Watson of the WA Parliament, for your years of guidance and mentorship. I would not be the person I am today, and I could not be the representative that I hope to be without your influence in my life. To my colleague, Senator Rachel Siewert, for your fearless advocacy on behalf of those who would otherwise have no voice in this place, particularly in relation to the disability community. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. You set an example, a dedication and an energy that I don't think anybody in this place will ever match. I value your advice and your guidance more than I could say. To former Senator Ludlam, whose breadth of vision allowed us as a collective movement to see in full technicolor what it will be like when we win. This place will never be the same without you here. Your contribution will never be forgotten. Our movement is so much stronger for being served by you. When I think of these people and the impact that they've had in my life, I'm reminded of a quote which is etched in the market streets of Salamanca in Tasmania, which has been quoted by my colleague Senator McKim recently in relation to the marriage equality debate, and was itself quoted at our national conference last weekend. In the wake of their courage, I swim. To the Greens WA, that great, varied and vibrant extended family to which I owe so much, thank you for all you have given me. I joined at the age of 16, a rather enthusiastic political nerd, I'm unafraid to say. You took me in and showed me that being involved could make a difference. You had faith in me. You supported me. And I cannot thank you enough for that faith and belief and support. To Molly MacLeod, And Molly, I think you're watching at home this evening. Thank you for giving me the courage to make my voice heard in this chamber. To my friends, my wonderful office team, you have been here with me on this crazy adventure since the very beginning. Whether I met you 6 years ago, whether I met you a month ago, whether I met you last week, I couldn't do this job, I wouldn't have entered this job, and I wouldn't know how to continue doing it without your endless enthusiasm. And I particularly like to acknowledge Chrissy and Jody here in the gallery tonight. We have been fellow Greens fanatics for a good couple of years now, and have shared many an election campaign together. I would not have managed to make it here tonight if it wasn't for you guys. I appreciate the multitude of 1 o'clock in the morning text messages that you've taken on my behalf. And lastly, to my family. To my mum, Tracy, to my brother Harry, to my grandma Jean, and my grandfather Len. From the moment I was born to the very many days on the campaign trail, to these minutes we've shared together, your love has been the undeniable constant of my life. It has formed the foundation stone on which I have and will build everything else. And I love you for it. To everyone here in the chamber, to those in the gallery and those watching at home, I want to thank you for your support and pledge myself to your service. The challenges before us now are profound, but I sit here tonight brimming with the belief that we can and will meet those challenges together. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, Chris. I call the clerk.
Government Business Order of the Day number 1, National Disability Insurance Scheme Amendment, Quality and Safeguards Commission and Other Measures Bill 2017, resumption of second reading debate.
Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. Through this process, I'm pleased to say that Labor has managed to work with the government to secure some important amendments to the bill. The government will move these amendments. I'd like to talk through these amendments now. In regard to advocacy, several submissions to the inquiry raised concern about the absence of the role